Well, it's kind of started where I left off. Last spring. I did a video and put on here about making partitions, dividers for these parts bins that I got from Harbor Freight, and I got those mostly done. I still got a few that I need to do. There's still a little bit of organization left to do on that, but I kind of run out of time on it. We got the mechanic here doing an annual on the airplane and I was doing that, and then I had to go help him. We wound up getting the floats all apart and replacing all the bolts and stuff in the floats, and then I had to get the plane in the water and get it ready to go for the season, and so I didn't get it quite finished. I got a few left to do, and but those bins turned out pretty good. So they're a lot better than they were, a lot better organized than they were. There's a lot of little parts, nuts and bolts and stuff involved in the airplane, and so this is what I did. I had the tin steel that I got out of old lacquer thinner cans and stuff that I cut and made these little partitions, and then like these are bigger, heavier nuts. They're not a big deal. They hold the partitions in pretty good, but some of the smaller ones, some of the smaller partitions or the smaller parts will slide under and around the partitions, and so those were glued in with a hot glue gun. But, let's see, here's another example of it. This is all small bolts, and so I was able to get them all sorted out. Now what I did have before was I just had a whole bunch of different sizes. I tried to keep the same size of bolt in the bins, but different lengths, but I kept them in these packages, and it was kind of hard to figure out. You'd have to pull a bin out and go through all the packages to find the exact size that you wanted and stuff. And so now this will be a lot better, and then it's a lot easier to keep a track of the inventory, so I can order and I know how many of each that I have, and I can order new ones when I need to. I said these bins are Harbor Freight bins, and they're pretty good. You can't put a whole lot of weight on them. You lean on them or anything, and they'll collapse on you. But they actually hold up pretty good. And the bins, the boxes themselves are pretty good. They just didn't have any dividers in them, so I got that done. Now this spring, it showed that last year, and that was another set of bins that I got from Harbor Freight, and these are meant to sit on a bench top. This rack is set on a bench top, and it's a flimsy, lousy setup. It barely holds itself up, and these bins are real thin, brittle plastic. And when we opened them up, there were a lot of them that were misshapen and bent in like this. You couldn't hardly use them, but they're so brittle you couldn't straighten them out. And I thought maybe they'd relax. They have relaxed a little bit, but they've broken just sitting there on the shelf. But I hadn't done anything with those. I kept mostly small odds and ends parts in those, and you can see kind of the mess that they are there. These particular ones right now have AN fittings, hose fittings of different sizes, and then there's some clamps and some other odds and ends. Well, that's kind of the way all of that was just like that. There's a lot of small screws and stuff that go into keeping the airplane, and on floats especially, they have a tendency to deteriorate, rust, even though I use stainless steel. But it takes a lot of them, and I like to change them out regularly. When you do maintenance on it, you just got to take them on and off all the time, and the Phillips heads get stripped on them. So anyway, this is a lot nicer now, having them organized like this. I can see right away what parts I've got, how many I've got, and get to them. And what I did on these here are still in the packages, but I do have bins for them. I kept them separated out. And this was the first one that I did on these. And what I did here was I cut up some of this metal that I had. This is leftover metal that I had from doing the other parts bins, and these are the bottoms out of those gallon lacquer thinner containers. And so what I did was I took and cut off this lip that's on here, this fold where the bottom is crimped onto the sides, and I trimmed those up into a rectangular piece, and then I cut pieces to fit inside of here. I folded over the top so that there would not be a sharp edge on there for when you stick your hand in it, and then I hot glued them in. But I could see that wasn't going to, and it worked okay. It stiffens these boxes up pretty good, and I'm able to put labels on it. I didn't really need labels on this one because these are all number 4 PK screws of different sizes, and I have different lengths, and I have them still in the packages that they come in, and they're labeled, so it's easy to see what they are. But so the next idea that I had, I got to looking around for an alternative. The next thing I come up with was these plastic dividers, and what I did with these, how I made these, these plastic dividers. These plastic dividers I cut out of old oil jugs, and I had several of these gallon oil jugs that, well, these have 1540 in them, Devil 400, which is what I use in my equipment, both for engine oil and for hydraulic oil. Well, I had several of them. I had a whole bunch of them around, but they were getting in the way this last fall, and I wound up putting them in the recycle bin and sending them off to recycle. But I had a few left here from, I had an oil hydraulic hose go out the other day, and I had to replace, and so I had to dump a bunch of oil in the hydraulic tank of my Bobcat. So I had some of these jugs, and by cutting this is fairly flat surface here, I was able to cut this out. Then I was able to get about 3 or 4 partitions out of this and out of the backside, and then 3 out of this end, this side over here. But I ran out of those, and I got to digging around, and I found these, and they're older style. It's the same oil, but it's an older style jug, and it's not as wide. It's deeper, or it's thicker, but it's not as wide. So cutting these out, I was able to get 2 out of each side here, and then a couple out of the end here. But it was getting kind of awkward, and I was running out of this one I couldn't use because it still has oil in it. This is a piece that we get out of the backside, or the of this. That's how it cut out. So this one here, for some of them, I could still get 2 out of here. But it's getting to be kind of a pain in the ass to do. Well, first of all, on that first one I did, it worked out pretty good. What do we got here? The first one there that I did, this one, it worked out pretty good. It fit in there, and cut them to fit. I was able to cut them with a sharp knife and the scissors. Glued them in with a hot glue gun. But then sticking the labels on the bins, that stuff is so slippery even after washing all the oil off and using a little bit of acetone on them. they still couldn't get the labels to stick on them, so I had to use a little bit of hot glue on the labels on the sides of them and the middle of them to keep the labels to stick on. Well, then I found that, like on here, if I took these and used the side of the jug with the label on it that's on the jug, then it looks kind of funky there, because you've got all this old label on there, but the new labels would stick onto the paper label that's glued onto the oil jug. So I got quite a few of those, and like I say, I'm really happy with the way they turned out, and they strengthened up these bins quite a bit. But I ran out of oil jugs, and it was getting to be kind of time-consuming cutting those all out and everything. Oh, I got a different idea. I went down and got a couple of these big plastic for sale signs, and then I just measure out on these up, and I can stick these right in my metal shear and draw a line across here, the width that I want, which turned out to be 2 and 28/32. So that's how wide those were to fit in the bins. I could just draw that out and then draw off my sections here for the height that I wanted my dividers, which I made 2.5 inches. I might make the last one's a little bit lower than that, but and I was able to just cut these all off on the metal shear instead of having to cut them out by hand. They're pretty thick plastic. These are the thicker ones, and they were about $11.50 a piece, so they're not cheap. But the cheap ones were too thin to use. But these I can turn out. I think I get 6 or 8. I think I get 8 of them, maybe 10 of them out of each slice off of this, and it goes pretty quick. And so they fit in there pretty nice then, and the labels stick right to that. So that went a lot faster finishing that off. These are a little bit flimsier than the other ones, but it still stiffens it up real nice. But anyway, that organizes that pretty well. So and this thing is still pretty flimsy. You have to watch out for this stand here because it's pretty flimsy. You can't, just the weight of what's in here has bent this a little bit. You can't put any load on it at all. And these bins are pretty flimsy. But with the dividers in there, it stiffens these bins up quite a bit and makes them a lot more usable. So I've got 3 or 4 more of those bins to put dividers in, and then I'll have that pretty well organized. And then I still need to do a few more of those down there. For the larger size bolts, I've got all the nuts pretty well organized. I just have the larger size bolts, AN4s. AN4s I've pretty much got down. I've got 5s and 6s to get sorted out yet. But so anyway, I'm about ready for the mechanic to come again. I'm getting that better organized.